FODcast season 1 over and done with. We've had an amazing time. We've had 7 exemplary guests giving us their views on the world of digital commerce tech, what the future looks like, and all the changes we can expect over the course of the next few years. How was it for you?
I found it really insightful. We've had 7 guests who are all very highly regarded within their space, coming from relatively similar backgrounds, all having very different views on what we can expect for companies to really innovate and thrive over the next couple of years, really. And not just that, but the technology changes that we may see during that period of time. And we'll discuss that further as we look to wrap up the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoyed it. It was good speaking to such a variety of people and getting their insight. It obviously helps us in understanding that space better, but then therefore to be able to talk to our clients and candidates from a much more knowledgeable standpoint. But more interestingly for me, like you say, was the variation in viewpoints of the people we spoke to, and they're all doing very similar things and they're working with very similar clients, but they've got different ideas on how the future of the digital commerce tech world will look.
Definitely. I think touched upon AI, as AI was a really hot topic throughout a lot of the conversations. Some of the guests felt as though that was the next big thing. Others felt as though it was more of a buzzword, and actually we need to focus on the challenges that we're facing here and now before we start looking at getting into the depth of AI. And others felt as though actually that it had a lot of advantages.
So if you missed any of these episodes, then feel free to jump on iTunes or Spotify or YouTube or straight to our website, simply-commerce.co.uk, where all the snippets and all the episodes can be located, so you can get hold of all the golden nuggets of information that have been provided by our guests so far. So I reckon we're doing chronological order. James, why don't we jump in with the first guy that we interviewed, which is Mr. Michael Vax. What were your thoughts on Michael's FODcast?
So Michael's had a very interesting career. Most recently held senior roles within Elastic Path and Spryker. He has extensive experience working for these product-based companies, so he's very well equipped when it comes to knowing the products and what the product needs to meet the customer demands. Michael felt as though the best way that brands can connect with their customers is to have a seamless online and offline operation. Something that I would completely agree with. Obviously, there's a plethora of advantages within the digital space, but how can you really build that personal relationship with a customer if you don't have that face-to-face interaction with them like you do in so many stores?
Yeah, 100%. It's just that omni-channel, isn't it? And everyone knows what omnichannel is. So you've got your various channels which your consumers will access the product or service, but it's not seamless. It's far from seamless across some of the biggest retailers that we know, and getting that right, which then provides the best possible customer experience, is absolutely fundamental, which, like you say, was a point raised by Michael and others, as we'll talk about later.
Omnichannel has been a buzzword for I've been in this space now for nearly 10 years, and I think omnichannel has been a buzzword for the vast majority of it. But yet, like you said, there's still so many retailers that are failing to have that seamless experience between all of their channels, which makes you think, how are we going to have all of this disruptive tech within AI and everything else if we can't even have a seamless customer experience almost 10 years after coming up with the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. And that again is something that a number of people focus on. The other thing was how is tech going to disrupt? And he had an interesting answer on that. And he's got the background really to provide us with a real solid view on tech and the disruption it might cause. But he was one of the supporters of AI. He was one of the guys that said, really, I think this is going to have a really, really big impact over the course of the next few years. So some great insights there from Michael Vax. Really, really interesting. If you want to find out more and hear the full episode, please get yourself down to Spotify or Apple and download the full version of the podcast to get all the information and details that we had from the conversation with Michael Vax. So leads us on nicely to episode 2. James, tell us about episode 2.
So episode 2 was Mr. Branwell Moffat. So Bran is the UK Director of Customer Experience Consulting for KPS, one of the leading SAP commerce partners in the UK right now. Also a long-standing client of Simply Commerce. Bran's episode was really interesting because he also spoke quite a lot around improving the customer experience, loyalty, and brand awareness. Again, he felt that was going to be key for companies to really engage with their customers from an omni-channel process and keep their loyalty. The big question really was, as there is more competition online, and we're losing that one-to-one experience in store, what are we going to do and how can we do it to keep that interaction between the business and customer?
Yeah, well, he was massive on customer experience, which kind of goes in line with his title, UK Director of Customer Experience, right? So that's the thing. Yes. But he was massive on brand loyalty and customer experience. But interestingly, whilst discussing AI and AIAR, which we did with Bran on that podcast, that wasn't really the angle that he was taking. He was more about the fundamental basics, just doing the basics right to get the brand loyalty and make that experience for the person buying the product or service as good as possible. He said there are obviously a number of companies doing this really well, but it's not the majority. And I think for him, and I would be inclined to agree, as a consumer, mainly the experience is now becoming more important. I am, of course, trying to find a product at a good price, but it's not about the lowest price. I want to know that my experience is good, not only in the purchase, it's got to be quick and easy, but also for the returns. From a customer experience and returns point of view, I want to know that I can get that product back without some massive charge or being unable to get hold of customer services for 3 weeks because no one's answering the phone.
But I also agree, Tim, in the fact that customer experience is key. Yes, we do want products as cheap as possible. However, that isn't necessarily the only thing. And if customers can't if companies can't give their customers a good experience, then they will certainly be the key casualties off the back of COVID.
Bram went into a lot of detail in that podcast. There's plenty of stuff around digital commerce and the future of the tech in that space, particularly around the CX and the brand loyalties we've discussed. But if you want to hear the full details, get yourself down to the Apple Podcasts page or Spotify, and you can download the full episode there. Episode 3, Malcolm Wilde. Malcolm Wilde, Malcolm, Chief Strategy Officer for Side Digital. That's it. So Malcolm, obviously, I've known for a long time. You've known for a little while as well. Very, very informative. Really, really understands his stuff. He's been doing this for a long, long time. And he's working with one of the leading global digital commerce agencies at the moment in SI. I think his insights were probably the most unique out of all of the guests, I'd say. Actually, one of the points that he raised was one that I wasn't anticipating at all. And that was the impact of cryptocurrency. This is it's a hot topic, but I think it's very controversial within what we're talking about specifically. There was a very mixed bag in response to whether or not this would have an impact. But if I remember correctly, his view was very much this is going to have quite a big impact over the course of the next couple of years. And since then, actually, I think week by week, we're seeing the adoption of cryptocurrency as an accepted form of payment by more and more pretty big and prevalent retailers. So it may well be that he's onto something here.
So that's definitely the key takeaway from me. It was the first time the whole crypto conversation came into the podcast, and he felt as though if companies could get over such a volatile market, then it's certainly going to be a big player. Interestingly, a lot of the other conversations we had afterwards felt as though it was possibly too early on in the adoption of crypto, purely because of the volatility. But some felt that the underlying blockchain technology had a really big part to play in both retail and digital comtech. So for me, that was really interesting because that brought a new dimension into the FODcast and our conversations. Like you say, it is being more adopted. There's, I don't know the name, but one of the big NFL teams accepts payment in crypto, Dogecoin, which is obviously not really established as a key crypto technology just yet, amongst others. And I know many payment systems do also accept or are considering accepting crypto. So it is grown huge. It's obviously a hot topic right now, and it'll be very, very interesting to see what happens and if a digital wallet becomes normal in a few years, and how that then expands as well.
Yeah, and the digital wallet thing is interesting because the digital wallet is normal now. It's attached to our banks. Like how many retailers now are saying we're card only at the till. You go to the till and it says we're card only. They're not taking cash. And so that's becoming a much bigger thing. So it's whether or not it's the integration of that as an accepted currency into what is already now a probably predominantly digital payment system in the UK. I think that's what's got to happen.
Yeah, as you're right, so I was kind of referring to digital wallet as something slightly different, but that does make complete sense. I don't know. I feel like it's going to happen. I don't personally feel like we're there just yet. The volatility is still far too high. You look at the price fluctuations, they're anywhere between a couple and 20-30% on a daily basis. And if you're a retailer, how can you genuinely accept payment in something that you know could be worth half of its value within a couple of hours? However, we're seeing more and more demand and more interest within that space. And if that volatility decreases slightly and becomes a little bit more stable, then I really do believe that we will be making payments in Bitcoins and other coins maybe in 5-10 years time.
He also, off the subject of Bitcoin, talked about something that it really interests me, is about the high street. We want to know what that's going to look like, how that's going to change the next 5 to 10 years. And his view was slightly different to most others, which is it's smaller shops. And that was interesting for me. It's boutiques. We don't want big Debenhams or House of Frasers. We're interested in smaller boutiques, which I guess leads into the customer experience, right? Because you go into a small shop and you're greeted and they want to talk to you and they want to show you the products and they want to help you find sizes, which you don't get in your big Debenhams, House of Fraser, John Lewis. So maybe that's where those two kind of combine, is reducing the sheer size of the units and therefore making the actual experience more palatable for the consumer, rather than what they used to, which is get on and do it yourself, and there's no real engagement from the staff in the shop. So the loads of stuff that came from Malcolm off the back of that conversation. We've only touched the sides really in terms of our overview of the best bits, but if you want to hear the full episode of the podcast, have a look on Apple, iTunes, Spotify and YouTube, and you can find the full version of episode 3 with Malcolm Wilde there. So on to episode 4. Episode 4, James, talk to us about episode 4.
So episode 4 was with Kevin Murray. So again, Kev is highly regarded in the UK. I believe he's currently the UK MD for Greenlight Commerce, one of the leading multi-platform e-com solution providers in the UK right now. Also another long-standing Simply Commerce customer. Kev's was a really interesting conversation. Again, if I remember correctly, Kevin was all about working with the customers to define the solution. I mean, ultimately, technology needs to adapt. Right now, it's needing to adapt faster than it has done previously to meet the customer demands. But often the customer doesn't know what that solution is. They might say, we want to go on X platform, or we want to do this because they've seen some buzzwords online and they feel like headless commerce is the new thing because there's going to headless commerce. But actually, does that fit the solution that they need? So Kev was all about tailoring each experience to the customer and make sure that they weren't just picking a platform or technology because they've heard good things about it, but because it was actually genuinely right for their business.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that he made really clear from his point of view and from Greenlight Commerce is we've really got to get under the skin with the client and find out exactly what they're trying to do, because it's really easy to put a product in front of them and say this will solve your issues, but you've got to understand exactly what those issues are. I think that was one of the things that he really pushed on. He was adamant that there's substantial innovation coming. Now, he wasn't 100% clear on what he thought that was, whether that's because it's top secret and he knows he won't tell us, or he's just not sure at the moment. I would suggest it's probably because there is so much likely change. That the obvious last big change he raised was mobile, and that had a huge impact on how we all go about buying things online. So I'm interested to see what that change is, and there are a number of things that obviously we've spoken about in this podcast, but it'd be good to see exactly what comes through as the next big thing, really.
Yeah, he said, if I remember correctly, coming out of situations like we just had with COVID, everyone has ideas and there's always huge innovation and disruption, but is there going to be something as truly disruptive as mobile? He wasn't willing to put a bet on it, was he? So I guess we will see. It was a very interesting conversation, and if you want to hear more about it, then tune in to Spotify or iTunes, episode 4 with Kevin Murray.
Absolutely. So episode 5, we were joined by Peter Bergeroff, whose name I managed to pronounce pretty much correctly, which I was very, very pleased about. So Peter's from Boston Consulting Group, not someone we've worked with very much so far, but someone who's a very, very interesting character to have on and gave us a slightly different angle, obviously not so UK centric in his approach, although he understands the UK market pretty well, which was clear. And he gave us some depth of knowledge around the retailers. And one of the key things he said about the retailers, specifically the ones that he's working with, is they simply must take the investment in technology seriously. It's got to be an absolute priority. I think from the conversation we had, it seems that a number of the clients that he's engaging with are doing it because they know that it's something they need to do and everyone else is doing it. So therefore we've got to invest in our digital platform and the digital channels for our consumers. But he's not convinced that it is absolute priority. And that comes from understanding why we're doing this. What is the benefit? What are we going to see? What do we need to invest in? What kind of ROI are we going to see off the back of this?
Yeah, I imagine, given his role as director of retail technology, he has these conversations day in, day out with customers. Because I guess similar to previous episodes with Kev, it's about having a solution to the customer and actually making sure they're doing things for the right reasons, not just implementing something because it's the in thing to do. Does it meet the business demand and so on and so forth? If I believe it was Peter that also mentioned making sure that IT and business works together with this transformation, because so often you see companies still operating with IT, marketing, and the business operations as separate units. But however, they all have to work hand in hand and together in order to really, one, enable the company to do this transformation that it needs to do initially, but then also thrive with the changes that it's made. Most importantly, Peter said the business can't be afraid to bring in external support. So whether that be via third parties or even hiring specialists within certain fields, the people that you have in the business are great at what they do. But when it comes to such drastic change like a digital transformation, are they the right people on board? And the answer is probably no, because they don't have those specialist skills in those areas. So the company has to be prepared to possibly ruffle some feathers and bring in some senior hires to really shape the direction of the company.
Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed from the conversation with Peter is he was probably the closer aligned to Kev Murray in terms of the client engagement. So that he spoke a lot about that, and he was very, very clear that one of the big problems is the clients don't know where to start, which is kind of what Kev's saying, is get under the skin and find out what the real issues are. Because Peter said, I remember this saying, which opportunity should the clients be jumping on? There's loads of tech, there's loads of things available for them to do, but what should they be doing first? And they need to think about who they're trying to serve and what they're trying to get from those people in order to work out where to invest that money and what technology they should be driving through their businesses. And that, for me, is a very interesting point, because although we're looking at what the next big thing is going to be and what the next big disruptive tech is going to be, that doesn't make it right for every single client, which I think was Peter's main driving point.
Yeah, that's it. I think the phrase used was, is it value driven? And I guess that summarizes things really well.
Yeah, certainly value driven. That was the one. So that's just a small section of the stuff we got from Peter on the podcast. There's a whole wealth of other insights from the hour plus long podcast. So head over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube to get the whole of episode 5 with Peter Bergeroff. Swiftly sliding into episode 6, smoothly as you like. Episode 6 was actually someone that you've been working with over the course of this year, James.
It was with Arun Sharma. So Arun is one of the managing partners for Elysian Netherlands. Elysian, again, a leading SAP partner within the Benelux region. Arun has some really good insights, and something that we spoke a lot about was the challenges that retailers are currently facing. And one of those big challenges, again, is going back to the experience. And if you look at the in-store experience, let's say you go into the high street, you'll go out with your friends or your family, and you have that experience of going to the high street, pop into the shops. Not only are you going into the shops, but you're also bonding with your friends and your family. And that is something that digital just cannot offer. You don't go onto a website to buy some clothes and sync up with your friend at the same time and have a coffee whilst you're on a video call browsing ASOS, for example. Like, that just doesn't happen. So his approach was really interesting, talking about the experience outside of retail that you have with your friends and family you go shopping with.
Yeah, and that's something, like you say, that's never going to be replicated. And it kind of goes back to creating a seamless link between those channels. And how do you do that? And one of the obvious ways, which comes up time and time again, is to make the whole experience as nice as possible for the consumer, and enable the digital channels to work seamlessly in a physical space. Effect of a product or a menu or similar in your home. So you have 3D modeling on your screen, but you were talking about the screens are flat, so it's not the same kind of engagement. But if you can have perhaps a projected image where you can walk around and you can see it and you can look from all angles, that's the kind of thing, I think, in his mind, that augmented reality will be used for, and machine learning will be used for, to enable people to get or retailers to get products into people's houses in that way. Yeah,
that was it. And he gave the example of shoes, I believe, where obviously in the store you would ask for a pair of shoes, you would get to touch them and see them and obviously try them on. And you wouldn't be able to try on an augmented reality image of a shoe, but you would be able to touch it, see it, and get a scope for the size and what have you. Who knows? You might be able to walk around in the next few years as well. Let's see what happens.
You try on, and that's how that will work. So that was another good episode, actually, the podcast. I enjoyed that one. So if you want to get to listen to the whole thing, episode 6, get down to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, and you can get the whole thing downloaded and get all the insights from Arun. Final episode 7, final episode of the season. absolute banger of an episode. We had Kelly. Kelly is very much Mac focused, being the Chief Product Officer at Commerce Tools, but also one of the two co-founders of the Mac Alliance. He certainly speaks his mind. He knows what he thinks, and he is very, very happy to share that. He gave us some great insights, and there were a couple of things for me that I'm completely unaware of, and really, really helpful for me to get a better view of what the future holds, both for the industry sector that we work in the digital commerce environment, but also what we as a business should be anticipating in terms of the type of people we're going to be placing into our clients.
Yeah, so like you said, he's not afraid to speak his mind, and something I really enjoyed about the episode of Kelly. A couple of the big things he noted was how the reason why big vendors like IBM and Oracle are struggling to adapt, and that's purely because they have their products line already. And when you try and acquire smaller businesses to adapt your products, you're always going to struggle to keep your current customers satisfied. So you look at Oracle with their acquisition to form Oracle Commerce Cloud. I mean, in his word, that was a failure, and I would be inclined to agree with him. We've seen, I mean, I could count the number of Oracle Commerce Cloud implementations in the UK on one hand that I'm aware of. And for products formerly ATG, which had such a huge dominant market share 15 years ago, it's crazy. And it really epitomizes the reasons why big software companies like Oracle are struggling right now, and challenges within that commerce space, within the CMS space, in the headless front end space, are doing really, really well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that he pushed back on was AI and AR, and his view is it's not really there yet. It's not going to be life-changing, or it's not going to dominate the landscape of digital commerce, not in the near future. But he did have quite a good example of a use for it. So he talked about it within his business. There's a team that focuses on it, and one of the
wasn't it?
Say again?
Or machine learning.
Machine learning, which was underpin the use of the AI.
Yeah.
And from his point of view, a good application is product categorization. And he talked about the running shoe that could be a casual shoe, which category is it in? Because if you search for it in one, you won't find it in the other, and it should be available in both. And that for him was a good use of machine learning and AI to give suggestions to retailers where should you be categorizing all of these products. That makes a lot of sense. It's not going to change the customer experience directly. They won't really know about it. It won't be something they feel and buys them into the retailer, but from being able to sell more products, that's certainly going to help them.
Yeah, definitely. And the shoes are a really good example, actually, because I know I've gone on websites beforehand and I've been looking for a certain pair of trainers, and you're trying to think, how are these categorized? Because they probably are a running shoe, they probably are a sports shoe, they probably are a casual shoe. Yet you're looking through all of these areas, and some of which have got hundreds and hundreds of lines in them, and you can't find the shoes that you're looking for. If they were advertising all three of them, then you're going to have more chance of finding that shoe, and in turn buying that shoe. There's only so long you look on a website to find a particular type of trainer before you go and search Google or search a competitor website to see if it's any easier. So that's a really good point, and something I understand they're really investing in within the Commerce Tools product.
Yeah. And that actually is one of the problems that online has for something like trainers, right? Is you can only see 6 to 8 on a page, and you've got to scroll and scroll and scroll and then go in and look. Whereas you go in the shop and they're all there and you can just have a look, just pick it up. And that's something that could be what we're talking about with the customer experience and getting digital together with the physical. Because actually you just want to go in and see what those trainers look like, and they don't have to stock all of them in your size, because if you know what your size is, or you have one single size trainer of that brand that you know will fit, then naturally the rest can be pre-ordered. And if they can get same day delivery, then happy days, you're going to get the shoe on the same day, so it doesn't make a difference.
Definitely, when you couple that with something like Klarna or ClearPay or any other delayed payment system, when you can almost order those products to your house, try them all on, and then send them back within 24 hours for free, and then only pay with the products that you keep, then to me that is as close as you can get to that experience without actually having the experience directly.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that he brought to the table, which was something that again no one else mentioned, was the importance of mentoring. I think he said there was a huge value for him placed on mentoring and making sure that the right talent comes up, and that was off of his own experience. And I think he said his mentor gave him the best possible platform to be successful, because we were talking about what's going to be really important in digital commerce moving forward. And really, it's about the people from his point of view.
Yeah, I guess the environment that you're in and where you develop your career is going to be key to enabling yourself to become a thought leader in that space in the future. If I remember correctly, Kelly's background is within Oracle, which is interesting because to be part of this business for so long, to then leave and have very strong views as to why that business isn't doing that well, it's really interesting because he obviously knows it inside out and back to front. And it's a really good point. And like I said, something that hasn't been mentioned before, the environment that you're in has a huge impact on your ability to really enable yourself to be a possible future thought leader in this space.
One of the things that's raging at the moment within our space is monoliths, the SAPs, the Oracles, etc., and the smaller headless focused API driven platforms that are coming through. And there are two very distinct sides to this. One side saying that the big vendors will continue and they will just adapt and become dominant once again. The other is that they've had their time and they're dying a very slow death. Now, I'm still not 100% sure. Obviously, Kelly's view is they are dying that slow death regardless. I think what he said is those big vendors are going to be unable to replace the products that are actually going to make the money. And with that view, then that's it. Those products will just continue until they are either not supported or they are taken away entirely and replaced with something else, at which point that will be the end of that service offering from that business. It will be interesting to find out how that plays out. And he gave us quite a bit of insight into that. So if you want to get the rest of the insight from Kelly and find out how those big monoliths are going to survive or whether they will or not, then head over to Apple, to YouTube, to Spotify to pick up the full length version of the series episode 7 podcast. So those are the 7 episodes for us. I think a really good first series, some really good and interesting guests. For me, the AI theme, I want to see how that plays out. Been talked about the whole time, different applications, different ways of making it useful within retail. That will be something that I'm really interested in seeing come to fruition over the course of the next couple of years. This balance between physical and digital, the constant changing of the face of the high street, how customer experience is going to be adopted and how they're going to blend those digital and physical channels together. Again, that will be something that will, for me, be very interesting to see how it pans out. And that monolith argument, whether or not these companies are going to exist in this space. I personally can't see how businesses of that size aren't going to make adaptations. It's such a lucrative market. It's such a good space to be in, and they have such funding behind them to make those adaptations and create the changes to the products. I can't see how they're not going to do that. I just think it might take a lot of time. They may lose a lot of market share in the time it takes them to make those adaptations.
Yeah, so as someone obviously who recruits extensively in that engineering space across the enterprise platforms, we're already seeing more and more demand for specialist resources within those big areas to maybe look outside of them and start considering sort of bespoke platforms or some of the challenger platforms. They're certainly taking up a lot more market share than they were a couple of years ago when you had the market predominantly covered by your likes of Magento, SAP, IBM, and Oracle. In my opinion, Shopify, BigCommerce, Commerce Tools, Spryker are really starting to get some good traction. And obviously the Mac Alliance, as we know all about, is really pushing its marketing, and platforms that sit within the Mac Alliance are really benefiting from it. Ultimately, it's going to go down to the customer and what do they want to do, what platform is going to allow their business to ultimately thrive and engage with their customers. Do they need something as potentially complicated as a complete Mac approach, which will require substantial investment from the business and time and new skills, or are they more covered with an out-the-box package, which can generally be implemented slightly quicker? That's going to be the interesting thing for me from a technology point of view. From a customer experience point of view, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. This is where the innovation is going to be. Every company out there is trying to find new and interesting ways to interact with their customers, which will in turn increase brand loyalty and increase revenue. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the next couple of years holds with regards to that, and just what can be done for brands to interact with their customers in a personable yet not intrusive manner.
Well, that is it for season 1. Cannot wait for season 2. Should be good. We've got some really good guests lined up. Keep an eye out for the new episodes. In the meantime, if you want to listen to season 1, go down to Apple, YouTube, or Spotify to listen to the full episodes. Subscribe, like, and if you can give us a comment on your favorite episode, that would be amazing. And we look forward to seeing you all for the next series of the FODcast.